is the area of mathematics and sciences, and yet these serve as the bedrock to attaining the skills of the future in the areas of artificial intelligence and robotics and so on. So what is it that the South African education system needs to do to improve attainment in these areas? Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined in studio by astrophysicist Professor Lerothodi Leeuw. He's from the National Research Foundation. Thanks very much for joining us, Professor. So let's get straight to it. What type of skills do you think South Africa needs to be globally competitive?
Math and science are really critical, and beyond that, analytical skills and weighing evidence against theory or ideas. Now, when I say evidence and theory, you might think I'm talking big university high-level language, but really even little kids actually entertain ideas all the time. When you ask a kid, how far is the sun, or they themselves wonder these kind of things, yes. Right? And or the sun compared to the moon, they wonder these things and make ideas themselves about those things. So the key thing is really how you weigh particular evidence to make sure that some idea that you've made up actually makes sense. Yeah, and mathematics is really important in being able to enumerate or detail this kind of evidence. And I think also mathematics should be starting very early. So just when we start to teach our kids to speak, we should be teaching them to count at the same time, right? So as fast as, or as early as you're teaching the kid to say mama, you should be teaching them to count 1, 2, 3 with particular objects. For example, say let's count the number of people in this room. Yeah, so we should separate this idea that education happens at school and then at home the things stop.
They should start immediately. What do you think that perhaps the Indians are doing right that South Africa is not doing right? Because as I mentioned in the introduction, we are really struggling in terms of our maths and sciences, and also the Minister of Higher Education alluded to the same thing.
The Indians and nations that do really well in terms of development do kind of what I was talking about, where mathematics and weighing evidence happen in people's homes, around the table when you are having dinner. You are starting to already just weigh things against each other. So as I mentioned, you might be counting the number of people in the room, but then add complexity a bit to it. You might then say, okay, what about the number of people in the other room? And then let's add those up. Or let's now imagine the number of people in this entire building or in our neighborhood, right? And let everybody propose particular theories or guess some particular answer to that, and then actually go ahead and solve the problem. Yeah. So constantly be engaged in that way, and then also look at what particular tools you could use to help you do that. And that's where the fourth industrial revolution comes in that it's essentially where the internet is this big tool that gets used to weigh evidence and really start solving problems. But it's really important to be able to first start at that foundation where you already know how to tackle problems, how to pose them.
Professor, you're a fairly smart guy. You've worked at NASA, and you're very bright. You're an astrophysicist and all of that. And you've been exposed to education on a number of continents. Do you think the South African context, the tertiary level, do you think it's able to support people with your kind of skills, people who come up with good maths and science, such that they can be ready for work anywhere in the world in terms of the fourth industrial revolution?
So at the pre-tertiary, South African schools, a lot of them are very good, right? Some of them might be what is called private schools or selected public schools. But we should really, I think, leverage this so that private schools are talking to public schools. Those that need support actually talk to each other. And I think we should also just open the schools a little bit so that in terms of intake, it's not just South African teachers that are there, it's not just South African students that are there, because then we start to allow those international ideas to come in. The international ideas that you mentioned about, happening in China, happening elsewhere in Africa, in the US. We should actually be able to say, some 10% of our students should be international, and we are not going to charge them extra because we are learning from them.
Professor, we can't discuss an issue as big as this in 5 minutes, but unfortunately it's the nature of television. Thank you very much for your time. That was Professor Lerothodi Leeuw. He's from the National Research Foundation.